Gleams from countless chandeliers twinkled above as servers in formal attire navigated skillfully amid Boston's upper crust. My dad's 80th birthday gala embodied precisely what he treasured most: opulent, selective, and engineered to dazzle. I straightened the folds in my unassuming blue gown, the best item from my closet, yet starkly subdued beside the high-fashion outfits and inherited gems gracing the other attendees. The gentle aroma of my mom's cherished scent, the single indulgence I granted myself, acted as a barrier against the oppressive haze of affluence filling the space. "Catherine, you really came." My sibling Victoria brushed her lips near my face in a superficial greeting, near enough for me to detect the hint of premium whiskey on her exhale. Her sparkling diamond studs reflected the glow as she stepped away to scrutinize me with thinly veiled dissatisfaction. "We figured you might skip it. Was it Melissa who persuaded you?" "Good to see you as well, Victoria," I responded, drawing a hesitant swallow from the bubbly drink that seemed overly sugary on my parched palate. "Indeed, my child holds family duties sacred, even if they're awkward." Melissa materialized beside me, gripping my elbow in quiet encouragement. At 33, she maneuvered these social currents with greater poise than I'd ever managed, her innate kindness forming a minor shield against the icy pragmatism that defined Blackwood clan events. "Grandpa's set to deliver his address," she murmured. The space hushed as my dad ascended the platform, resting lightly on a sleek black walking stick that appeared more ornamental than essential. At 80, Walter Blackwood cut a commanding presence, 6 feet of angular sharpness and unyielding resolve, his gray locks impeccably groomed, his tailored outfit draping flawlessly over unyielding shoulders. "I appreciate everyone joining me for this landmark occasion," he started, his tone echoing the commanding timbre that had sealed massive transactions and dismantled numerous rivals. "Reaching 8 decades offers a man insight into what counts most. Heritage." The term lingered like a verdict. My gut clenched. "I've constructed a dynasty deserving of defense, deserving of safeguarding," he went on, scanning the assembly before fixing his stare on my brother Alexander and sister Victoria, who straightened under his focus. "And I'm fortunate to have offspring who grasped the worth of my creation." A waiter circulated with flutes of sparkling wine, and I grabbed another, requiring an activity for my fingers. "Alexander, Victoria, step up here." My brothers and sister advanced like subjects nearing a monarch. These pair have elevated the Blackwood heritage far beyond my boldest visions. They comprehended dedication, drive, foresight. My dad's words brimmed with satisfaction, which is the reason I'm revealing the allocation of my holdings today. Roughly $39 million in real estate, yachts, portfolios, and cash reserves split between them. Cheers spread across the group. I stayed motionless, my expression deliberately composed, ignoring the accustomed ache. Melissa's fingers located mine and pressed. "It's fine, Mom," she breathed. We anticipated 0, but my dad hadn't concluded. He lifted his palm to silence the area, and an element in his demeanor chilled my veins. "And then we have Catherine." His utterance of my complete name cut sharply through the atmosphere. All gazes shifted to me. The overhead illumination abruptly seemed glaring, revealing. "My eldest," he proceeded, his inflection veering between mirth and disdain. "Who opted for verse instead of earnings, principles over accomplishment." He elevated his flute toward me in a derisive salute. "Who has devoted 6 decades demonstrating she grasped nothing about triumph or inheritance." The quietude in the venue was total. "Catherine," he declared, gazing straight at me. "You never merited a thing from this lineage, and that's precisely what you'll get." Chuckles spread through the audience, hesitant initially, then intensifying as my siblings' boisterous laughs encouraged participation. The noise enveloped me like surging tides. I placed my pristine bubbly on an adjacent surface and aligned my posture. 6 decades of his rejection had instilled one lesson: departing with grace. "Melissa, I'm heading out," I murmured. "Remain if you wish, Mom." "No." But I was already progressing through the throng, which separated as if I bore an infection. The stone flooring seemed infinite under my practical footwear. Outdoors, the sharp fall breeze soothed my heated complexion. I drew in a deep breath, saturating my chest with the fragrance of fall foliage rather than costly aftershave and criticism. My palms shook mildly as I searched for my vehicle keys in the poorly illuminated lot. Professor Blackwood. I pivoted to spot an older gentleman positioned nearby, his aged features somewhat recognizable. "I'm Thomas Edwards," he stated, his timbre soft yet pressing. "I served as your mom's lawyer and companion." The title evoked faded recollections, a benevolent figure who had dropped by our residence sporadically during my youth, who had attended my mom's burial 3 decades prior. "Mr. Edwards, ages have passed." He inclined his head, peering back at the estate. "I've anticipated this moment for 30 years, although I wished it wouldn't arrive." From his overcoat, he extracted a substantial packet faded with time. My name inscribed on the exterior in my mom's graceful script. "Your mom instructed me to deliver this should your dad ever perform what he just executed there." His gaze blended sorrow and expectancy. She extracted a vow from me. My digits quivered as I accepted the packet, the material chilled and substantial in my grasp. "Gratitude," I breathed, uncertain of further words. "Examine it this evening," he advised, slipping a contact card into my hand. "Reach me tomorrow." In the security of my automobile, under the shine of the cabin lamp, I fractured the wax imprint my mom had affixed 3 decades earlier. The trace of her essence, dim but distinct, ascended from the sheets as I expanded the note. The opening sentence halted my respiration. "My beloved Catherine, if this reaches you, it signifies your dad ultimately enacted what I perpetually dreaded. He attempted to rob not merely your entitlement, but your self-respect. Now it's the occasion for you to discover the reality concerning all matters." I perused the note thrice that evening, each perusal unveiling depths I'd overlooked previously. My palms trembled as I arranged the enclosed records over my dining surface. Official forms, financial records, and vintage images that depicted a narrative vastly divergent from the clan chronicle I'd embraced throughout my existence. "Your dad erected his realm on deceit," my mom inscribed. "The starting funds originated from my kin, not his maritime enterprises, as he's perpetually asserted. Upon our union, he methodically shifted my bequest into his ownership, not via coercion, but through my innocent faith. Beyond my pain, precipitation started tapping on the pane, a mild contrast to the storm within my core. My humble 2-room home in Cambridge abruptly seemed cramped, as though the burden of these disclosures compressed the barriers inward. What you remained unaware of, Catherine, is that I ceased relying on him ages prior to my illness confirmation. I foresaw what he would inflict on you after my departure. How he would penalize you for resembling me, for prizing wisdom over dominance, empathy over dominance. I decanted a goblet of red wine, my passage arid. Eleanor Blackwood, the serene, cultured lady who had instructed me in rhymes and escorted me to galleries while my brothers and sister inspected building zones with our dad, had been executing a prolonged strategy one never imagined. Collaborating with Thomas, I formed an independent entity named Nightingale Ventures. Via this organization, I've obtained about 15% of Blackwood Enterprises' original equity. I utilized funds from my grandma's fund that Walter remained oblivious to. The attached summaries indicated that across 3 decades, those placements had expanded dramatically. The current worth was astonishing, almost threefold what my dad had boastfully declared he was bestowing on my brothers and sister. Moreover, I've set up an independent fund in your designation, managed by Atlantic Trust Bank in the Cayman Islands. The starting contribution was discreet enough to evade Walter's detection, but under Thomas's prudent oversight, it ought to grant you stability irrespective of your dad's actions. Per the latest summary, discreet had evolved into $22 million. My beverage cup rattled on its plate. All these periods subsisting on an educator's income, prudent spending, humble trips, while unbeknownst to me, I possessed entry to a wealth. While my brothers and sister paraded their riches, I'd existed plainly, assuming it was my sole choice. I don't anticipate you'll employ this for vengeance, Catherine. Vengeance erodes the spirit. But fairness restores. Thomas grasps every particular and will direct you. Rely on him as I have. The note concluded with what shattered me utterly. I've observed you mature into a lady of deep honor. Catherine, you selected a route of significance over riches, of giving over gathering. I couldn't feel more gratified. Apply this unforeseen influence prudently. It's not regarding the funds. It's concerning the facts. And facts, my dear, form the supreme heritage. Her autograph, refined and resolute, blurred under my droplets, morning light discovered me yet at the dining surface, the record sorted into tidy stacks, my thoughts whirling with options. The scholar within me had assumed control, evaluating, inquiring, strategizing. When Melissa phoned to verify my well-being, I had steadied myself. "Mom, are you all right?" Her timbre bore the burden of the prior evening's embarrassment. "In fact, yes," I replied, astonishing myself with the firmness in my speech. An unforeseen event occurred. "I'm heading there," she declared promptly. Upon Melissa's arrival, attired in medical garb from her early hospital shifts, her countenance was taut with worry. I prepared Java as she eyed the heaps of records on the surface with interest. "What's this collection?" she inquired. I passed her a cup and settled. "Your grandma bequeathed me a message. It appears I'm not as impoverished as your grandpa desired all to assume." I detailed all: the assets, the fund, the equity. Melissa's look transitioned from anxiety to amazement. "Mom, this positions you as a key investor in Blackwood Enterprises," she remarked, her clinical accuracy swiftly assessing ramifications. "You might genuinely affect corporate choices. Evidently, I've been doing so without identification. For Thomas, my mom's organization has sporadically thwarted some of Dad's more morally dubious actions over the years. He never identified the source." Melissa placed her Java aside. "What will you do?" The inquiry suspended between us. The evident response, direct challenge, a victorious disclosure, glimmered enticingly. "Nothing." "Not immediately," I stated, surprising us both. "Initially, I must comprehend precisely what I'm handling." "You're not planning to inform them?" Melissa appeared stunned. "Information is strength, darling. Currently, I possess information they lack. The instant I disclose it, the balance alters." My device rang. Thomas Edwards. I activated speaker. "Have you examined all?" he questioned without introduction. "Yes, it's staggering." "There's additional," he stated solemnly. "Blackwood Enterprises confronts a severe predicament. The Boston Globe is gearing up an investigation on graft in public building agreements. Your dad and brothers and sister are involved." Melissa's gaze expanded. I sensed the foundation move under me once more. "How severe?" I queried. "Possibly unlawful. An urgent board session occurs tomorrow. Your dad remains unaware, but Nightingale's consent will be needed for their mitigation tactic." "And Nightingale is me," I murmured. "Exactly." Following the call's end, Melissa regarded me. "Mom, this exceeds individual fairness now. Individuals could suffer if the firm crumbles. Countless workers, retirees." Her regard for unknowns, amid our household turmoil, filled my heart with admiration. This was my offspring, caring, principled, sensible, all I'd striven to embody, all my mom had esteemed. "You're correct," I affirmed. "This isn't solely about rectifying wrongs. It's about duty." I collected the records into my satchel, the one I'd transported to college classes for 2 decades, and resolved. "I require attire," I declared plainly. "Something suitable for a board assembly." Thomas encountered me at Neiman Marcus the next day. It seemed dreamlike having the senior lawyer following as a stylist directed us amid arrays of luxury apparel. "Too showy," Thomas observed on a vibrant ensemble. "You seek command, not notice." We chose a dark gray Armani with faint stripes. Timeless, restrained authority. The cost label caused me to hesitate despite my recent prosperity. "View it as protection," Thomas remarked, observing my pause. In the changing area, I gazed at my image. A figure I scarcely identified stared back. My gray-flecked brunette tresses, typically in a basic cut, were newly arranged. The outfit suited ideally, highlighting a subtle poise I'd always held, but seldom displayed. "Eleanor would feel gratified," Thomas commented as I stepped out. "You appear as what you are, a primary investor." During midday meal, in a secluded spot of the shop's eatery, Thomas informed me on what we understood about the controversy. His contacts had supplied alarming specifics. The Globe possesses proof that Blackwood Enterprises routinely compensated authorities to win public agreements for the Harbor Front Renewal Initiative. They inflated costs for supplies, then rebated the excess to dummy firms controlled by your brother and sister. And my dad, I questioned, sanctioned all their messages. Thomas handed me his device, showing correspondences among Walter, Alexander, and Victoria, debating what they termed expense modifications. They might face incarceration, I breathed, the seriousness absorbing. The firm could fold completely, Thomas supplemented, which would result in thousands of blameless staff losing employment and retirements, I concluded, plus the effect on the metropolis if the Harbor Front Initiative fails. We devoted the afternoon in Thomas's workspace examining fiscal overviews, company rules, and judicial examples. By dusk, I felt as ready as feasible, though rest evaded me that evening. I repeatedly envisioned my dad's scornful expression as he openly shamed me, contrasted with the countenances of anonymous staff whose existences teetered on the edge. The Blackwood Enterprises main office claimed the upper 10 levels of a shining urban skyscraper. I'd come only twice prior, once for the structure's launch event during my university years, and later for an awkward meal with my dad when Melissa sought medical programs. Both occasions, I'd sensed like an outsider. Today differed. I passed through the spinning glass entrances with intent. Thomas beside me. The guard verified our credentials, his brows lifting marginally at my identity. "You're Mr. Blackwood's offspring." "I am," I answered straightforwardly. The private lift carried us to the 45th level. Thomas had synchronized our entry exactly, delayed enough that the session would commence soon, but not so postponed they could fairly bar us. "Recall," Thomas murmured as the lift rose. "You needn't expose all immediately. Observe first." Grasp their tactic. The conference chamber entrances were formidable, dense walnut with the Blackwood Enterprises emblem embedded in metal. I detected voices within, my dad's distinctive command dominating. Thomas inclined his head supportively. I aligned my posture, recalled my mom, and pushed the entrances. The discussion ceased suddenly. 14 expressions pivoted toward us, ranging from bewilderment to open antagonism. My dad, at the table's lead, halted mid-phrase. Alexander and Victoria, guarding him like watchmen, appeared as though they'd encountered a specter. "I regret the disruption," I stated, my timbre more composed than I sensed. "Proceed, Catherine." My dad regained composure first, his inflection disbelieving. "What are you attempting?" "Participating in the crisis board session," I responded, advancing to a vacant seat near the table's center. Thomas occupied the position next to me. "This is a private gathering," Alexander retorted. "Restricted to board participants and advisors solely." "I'm informed," I remarked, unlocking my satchel and extracting a slender dossier. "Thomas Edwards, my counsel, and I trust you'll discover I possess full entitlement to attend." The firm's chief advisor, Diane Sullivan, a keen-visaged lady I knew from benefit functions, furrowed her brow. "Miss Blackwood, with respect, Professor Blackwood," I amended softly. "Professor Blackwood," she adjusted. "This session involves extremely confidential business issues." "The Harbor Front Project Graft Probe," I declared. "Yes, I'm knowledgeable." The chamber grew profoundly still. My dad's countenance darkened ominously. "How precisely do you know of that?" Victoria insisted, her impeccably trimmed nails pressing into the hide binder before her. Rather than replying, I pushed my dossier toward Diane. "I suggest you authenticate these materials, Miss Sullivan." She accessed the dossier resignedly, reviewing the contents with expert speed. I observed her demeanor alter, puzzlement, then astonishment, then a form of admiration. "Mr. Blackwood," she articulated cautiously, "it seems your offspring is the actual proprietor of Nightingale Ventures." A choked noise emerged from Alexander's passage. "That's unfeasible," my dad asserted. "Nightingale holds a 15% interest in Blackwood Enterprises," Diane concluded. "And per the company regulations, any protective measure concerning possible illegal probes demands a qualified majority, which requires Nightingale's consent." My dad's complexion shifted from flushed to pale. For the initial instance in my existence, I perceived an element in his gaze I'd never observed prior: dread. "Greetings, Dad," I uttered softly. "I think we must discuss the trajectory of our household enterprise." "You lack entitlement," he commenced. But his timbre missed its customary dominance. "I possess every entitlement," I rectified. Mother ensured that. The chamber's climate appeared to plummet 10 degrees. "Eleanor," he breathed. And in that solitary term, I detected 3 decades of concealed matter starting to disentangle. "This is ridiculous," Alexander stammered, regaining composure first. "Some outdated forms don't qualify you to, Alexander," Diane interrupted firmly. "These materials are fully valid." She regarded me anew. "Professor Blackwood is rightfully permitted to attend this session." My dad's palm quivered faintly as he extended for his hydration vessel. I feigned ignorance. "I'd like to comprehend the circumstance we're confronting," I stated evenly, directing Diane instead of my kin. "The complete circumstance, please." The business advisor paused, glancing at my dad. "Miss Sullivan," I uttered quietly. "I control 15% of this firm. That renders me your patron too." She inclined her head, expert facade securely reinstated. "The Boston Globe has acquired materials implying irregularities in the Harbor Front Initiative's tender procedure. They're assembling a piece claiming that Blackwood Enterprises obtained deals via disbursements to municipal authorities enabled through exaggerated subcontractor charges." "How did they acquire these materials?" I inquired. "We suspect a past staff member in finance," Diane answered. "Informant," I amended softly. "The phrase is informant." My brother's complexion reddened furiously. "If you're present to preach, I'm present to comprehend," I cut in. "And to assist, if feasible." I pivoted back to Diane. "What's our vulnerability?" "Considerable," she conceded. "Both monetary and penal." "The proof is persuasive." Thomas vocalized a cough. "And the suggested tactic?" Diane passed multiple records across the surface. The board was preparing to ballot on a triple strategy: legal restriction, tactical transfer of the Harbor Front Initiative to a sympathetic external entity, and blame shifting. Thomas remarked, examining the sheets. "You're intending to attribute all to the initiative supervisor." "Robert served us for 2 decades," I noted, recollecting the amiable gentleman who'd always saluted me warmly during my infrequent firm visits. "He has 3 offspring and a spouse with chronic illness." "Commerce isn't concerning emotions," my dad snarled, recovering his speech finally. "No," I concurred. "But it ought to concern uprightness." The chamber descended into quietude once more. I permitted myself an instant to absorb the view. My formidable dad abruptly reduced, my brothers and sisters simmering with bewilderment and bitterness. The board participants observing this kin spectacle with expert indifference concealing evident intrigue. "What do you suggest alternatively?" Diane inquired, her inflection meticulously impartial. Before I could reply, Victoria's sharp chuckle pierced the strain. "She hasn't entered this structure in ages. She instructs verse to college kids. What could she conceivably understand about rescuing a firm from controversy?" I grinned at my sister. "I instruct writings, Victoria. Morals, outcomes, the extended curve of mortal deeds. It's truly quite pertinent." I rose and approached the pane. From 45 stories high, Boston extended before me: the bay, the ancient structures, the districts where actual individuals resided and labored. Individuals who would be impacted by what transpired in this chamber. "The tactic you've sketched is myopic," I declared, turning to confront the board. "It might limit the instant harm, but it forfeits enduring confidence. It safeguards persons at the cost of the establishment." "And you possess a superior notion?" Alexander mocked. "Yes," I affirmed plainly. "Openness, responsibility, compensation." "That's not a tactic," my dad barked. "That's self-destruction." In truth, Thomas inserted, activating his portable computer. "We've formulated an alternate method." He circulated dossiers to each board participant. "The Blackwood renewal strategy." I observed their expressions as they assessed our suggestion crafted during yesterday's extended consultation with Thomas's group. Doubt yielded to hesitant evaluation as they digested our method, confessing faults, collaborating with officials, forming a morals supervision group, providing amends to the metropolis and shielding initiatives, positions, and retirements. "This is ludicrous," my dad ultimately declared, closing his dossier forcefully. "You desire us to impale ourselves. I desire us to preserve the firm," I rectified. "And yes, that entails accepting accountability." "Us," Victoria echoed disbelievingly. Abruptly, "It's us. It's perpetually been us, Victoria. I simply wasn't welcome to the surface." I held her stare firmly. "But I'm present now." Diane shattered the impasse. "Mr. Blackwood, from a legal standpoint, we cannot advance without Professor Blackwood's consent. Considering the proof the globe holds, her method truly provides notable benefits regarding harm mitigation and possible judgment mercy." "Judgment." Alexander blanched. "Yes," Diane stated directly. "Penal accusations are probable irrespective of our tactic. The issue is whether we confront them as persons or as a firm." My dad shoved his seat back and stood, his commanding build now somehow diminished. "This session is concluded. I must confer privately with my advisory group." "The board must ballot, Walter," Diane prompted. "Today, for hours," he rebutted. "We resume at 3. As the board participants exited, my dad stayed positioned, gazing at the surface. Alexander and Victoria lingered uncertainly near him. When the chamber cleared except for us, Thomas and Diane, my dad ultimately lifted his gaze to me. 3 decades, he uttered, his timbre empty. 3 decades she's been directing this from beyond. Mother wasn't directing reprisal, I stated softly. She was guaranteeing equity could occur someday. Equity, he reiterated, the term appearing alien on his tongue. Is that what this constitutes? No, I affirmed, assembling my items. This is merely the commencement. Thomas and I withdrew to a minor meeting space along the corridor. Through the transparent barriers, I observed managers rush by, their looks strained, murmuring hastily into devices. Information was circulating. "You performed admirably," Thomas remarked, decanting hydration for us both from a glass vessel. Eleanor would have felt gratified. "I don't sense gratified," I confessed. "I sense sorrowful." I realized my dad was merciless in commerce, but genuine graft, unlawful conduct. Did my mom realize it would escalate this far? Thomas shook his cranium. Eleanor understood his nature, not his forthcoming deeds. She established a protection, not a prediction. My device vibrated with a message from Melissa. "How's it progressing?" I keyed rapidly. "Intricate. We'll clarify tonight." "Professor Blackwood." Diane materialized at the entrance. "Your dad requests to converse with you alone." I located him in his workspace, an expansive edge area with panes from base to apex and a workstation the dimensions of my eating area. Transparent enclosures showcased models of his renowned initiatives. Honors adorned the partitions, all crafted to daunt. 3 decades, he declared without prelude as I arrived. 3 decades I've pondered who directed Nightingale. Some adversary. Some monetary predator. Never did I envision. It wasn't me, I stated. It was Mother Eleanor. He nearly breathed her title. She was perpetually perusing, perpetually observing. I should have realized she comprehended more than she revealed. "She adored you," I remarked, astonishing myself with the terms. "At minimum initially." She informed me that in the message. He pivoted to confront me, and for the first occasion, I perceived authentic bewilderment pierce his meticulously built exterior. "Then why?" "Because she foresaw you would execute precisely what you did at your celebration. You would chastise anyone who didn't reflect your principles back." The communication system on his workstation sounded. "Mr. Blackwood, Alexander and Victoria are demanding. Admit them." He terminated his aid. My brothers and sister erupted into the space, their countenances dual images of rage and alarm. "The board favors Catherine's suggestion," Alexander declared without salutation. "Sullivan is persuading them it's the sole method to reduce individual risk." "And you're merely seated here conversing," Victoria appended incredulously. "We're conversing about your mom," my dad responded, his timbre unusually level. "Mom?" Victoria fluttered her lids. "What does she relate to anything?" "All, evidently." He motioned toward me. "She initiated all this prior to her passing." Alexander regarded me as if genuinely perceiving me for the initial time. You've been manipulating us? No, I affirmed. I solely discovered my equity 2 days prior, but now that I'm aware, I plan to utilize them conscientiously. Conscientiously. Victoria's chuckle was fragile. By demolishing all we've constructed? By preserving what can be preserved, I amended. The present course leads to charges, confinement terms, and the firm's downfall. My strategy provides a route ahead. Your strategy demands us to confess faults, Alexander yelled. Because faults occurred, I stated softly. The matter isn't if the firm endures, but what sort of firm endures. That could encompass most of upper administration, Diane observed. Yes, I recognized, which is why the strategy also encompasses a command-shift structure. I halted, then appended, we confront a selection between a managed, ethical reorganization or an unmanaged downfall. The ballot arrived quicker than I anticipated. 10 supporting, 3 opposing, 1 refrain. My dad didn't ballot whatsoever. His quietude somehow more resonant than speech. What ensued was a vortex. Diane and Thomas clustered with publicity groups to shape declarations. I discovered myself in successive consultations with judicial groups, composing text for media announcements and oversight revelations. By 7 that dusk, my timbre had roughened and my fresh attire was creased. Melissa located me in the managerial lounge, gazing out at the bay illuminations activating as twilight enveloped Boston. You appear drained, she remarked, placing a sack that emitted a delightful fragrance of herbs and tomato. I fetched supper from Antonio's. How did you bypass security? I queried, abruptly famished. I informed them I was Dr. Blackwood here to meet Professor Blackwood, she grinned. Strictly precise. As we consumed noodles from disposable holders with synthetic utensils, I updated her on the day's progress. So basically, you're rescuing the firm from its own actions, she recapped. Attempting to, I amended. Tomorrow, when the piece emerges, it becomes complex. Are you prepared for what's next? Melissa inquired, examining my countenance with the attentive care she'd afford a sufferer. Before I could respond, my dad appeared in the entrance. He discarded his jacket and slackened his neckwear, minor concessions that on him seemed monumental. I require a moment with your mom, he declared to Melissa, his inflection permitting no debate. She pressed my palm before collecting the meal holders. I'll be below in the foyer, she informed me softly. When we were solitary, my dad decanted himself a measure of whiskey from the lounge counter without extending any to me. The action was so habitual, his requirements instinctively foremost, that I nearly chuckled. The board endorsed your strategy, he remarked, his rear to me. Yes, tomorrow my identity becomes equivalent to graft. He pivoted, assessing me over the edge of his vessel. 3 decades constructing a heritage, ruined in a day. Not ruined, I amended gently. Redirected. The structures will still endure. Individuals will still possess employment. The Blackwood identity will link to responsibility rather than rejection. He emitted a scornful noise. Romantic drivel. Maybe I yielded, but occasionally romance holds more verity than financial statements. He emptied his vessel, positioned it with intentional precision. Eleanor perpetually claimed you were the most astute of my offspring. I assumed she meant the most tender. They aren't incompatible. His gaze, so similar to mine, probed my countenance. Did she ever inform you why I constructed all this? Why it signified so much? To demonstrate something to your dad, I affirmed. The gentleman who claimed you'd never succeed. Astonishment flickered across his traits. She shared that with you? No, I uttered tenderly. I deduced it myself. Why else would you replicate the identical pattern with me? He recoiled as if I'd assaulted him. For an instant, I glimpsed something unprocessed beneath the haughty exterior, a damaged center that had propelled him for decades. The declaration issues at 9 tomorrow dawn, I declared, assembling my belongings. Diane will synchronize with judicial. The board anticipates your stepping down by midday. And Alexander Victoria, he queried. That hinges on what the probe discloses about their degree of participation, I answered. But yes, command alterations will be essential. He inclined his head once, a commander recognizing strategic loss. You secured this engagement, Catherine. This isn't about securing, I affirmed, abruptly weary beyond expression. It's about halting a pattern that injures all involved. As I proceeded toward the entrance, he articulated again, his timbre uncharacteristically tentative. Your mom. In the conclusion, did she despise me? I halted, recalling Eleanor's closing terms in her message. Even following all, I never ceased trusting in the gentleman I believed he could evolve into. No, I affirmed truthfully. She never despised you. She merely cherished Verity more. The subsequent dawn emerged bright and chilly, tinting the Cambridge heavens in hues of purple and amber. I positioned at my kitchen pane, palms encircling a hot cup of java, observing the periodical carrier execute its systematic circuits. The operator hurled rolled bundles onto paths with skilled accuracy, oblivious that today's version would fracture innumerable existences, including those of my own kin. In residences throughout Boston, individuals would shortly be perusing about Blackwood Enterprises, about my kin's shame, about decades of graft now revealed to the stark glare of communal examination. I expanded my own duplicate with firm palms. The banner extended across the primary page in stark, relentless font. Blackwood Graft Controversy, Harborfront Initiative erected on payoffs and deceit. The related piece was precise, condemning, and thorough, outlining a scheme of graft that extended back years. The writers had performed their research. They identified individuals, referenced records, cited informants. My dad, Alexander, and Victoria were highlighted prominently. There were even blurred images of my brother accessing the workspace of a municipal authority now under scrutiny. My device commenced ringing at 6:15. Initially journalists, then kin business partners, then remote kin I hadn't conversed with in ages, all pursuing remarks or internal details. I permitted most communications to divert to recording, responding solely to Thomas and Melissa. By 8, I activated the screen to discover that broadcast vehicles had already assembled outside Blackwood Tower centrally. Their transmission antennas elevated like blaming digits directed at the heavens. I observed the reporting from my sitting area, sipping beverage that had cooled, an odd tranquility settling over me. This was the tempest we had foreseen. Now we would endure it. Blackwood Enterprises issued a declaration moments prior, announced a grave-visaged broadcaster positioned before the shining tower bearing our identity, recognizing irregularities in agreement acquisition and declaring a broad business reorganization. Walter Blackwood, originator and head, is anticipated to step down by midday today. Insiders within the firm suggest that his offspring, Professor Catherine Blackwood, will assume a command position in the firm's improvement endeavors. Professor Blackwood has served as a writings educator at Westfield University for the past 25 years and has not formally participated in the kin enterprise. I deactivated the screen, not requiring to hear my existence condensed by unknowns. The noise of skidding wheels outdoors pulled me to the front pane. A metallic luxury vehicle had halted at my boundary, stationed at a peculiar slant that obstructed my neighbor's access. Victoria. My entrance bell sounded with insistent repeated force. Through the viewer, I perceived my sister, her typically flawless look disordered, her wool outerwear undone against the morning coolness. "You've destroyed us," she declared as soon as I unlatched the entrance. The odor of luxury fragrance blended with liquor drifted from her. Her gaze was reddened around the edges, her meticulously preserved poise cracking at the borders. "Are you satisfied now? Is this what you sought from the start?" "Enter, Victoria," I uttered softly. "The locals don't need to overhear this, and you shouldn't operate a vehicle in your state." She marched into my humble sitting area, surveying with instinctive contempt despite her turmoil. Her stare dwelled on the book racks lining the partitions, the aged yet cozy furnishings, the mounted images of Melissa over the years. "So this is the righteous existence," she grumbled, dragging her groomed digits along the backs of my treasured volumes. "Encircled by others' tales rather than crafting your own." I disregarded the jab. "Would you care for some Java? You appear as if it might help." "What might help is this ordeal concluding," she retorted, but she inclined her head curtly. I occupied myself in the cooking area, granting her a moment to regain composure. When I returned with 2 cups, she had shed her outerwear and was perched stiffly on my sofa. Alexander's counsel contacted this morning, she remarked, taking the Java with unsteady palms. He indicates Alexander might encounter confinement. Genuine confinement, Catherine. That hinges on his extent of participation, I affirmed. And his collaboration moving ahead. Collaboration. She chuckled sourly. You signify admission? Yield? Casting himself to the compassion of some eager accuser who aims to build a reputation by dismantling the Blackwoods. I signify accepting duty, I amended. There's honor in that, Victoria, more than in refusal or diversion. She sank further into the sofa, abruptly deflating. Simple for you to declare. You've nothing at risk. The repetition of Alexander's terms from the prior day struck me. Is that truly how you perceive me? As possessing nothing. Victoria lifted her gaze, mascara smeared beneath eyes so resembling our mom's. You educate writings at a mediocre institution. You reside in this compact space. You operate a vehicle older than Melissa. Your notion of achievement is making pupils value Shakespeare, for heaven's sake. And yet here I am directing the trajectory of Blackwood Enterprises. I positioned across from her. Perhaps your definition of nothing requires reevaluation. She gazed at me as if perceiving an unfamiliar person. Mom bequeathed you all that wealth, all that influence, and you never utilized it. Never even realized it existed. Why would she do that? I believe she was awaiting, I remarked reflectively, for the instant when it would signify most. And now you're the rescuer, Victoria remarked sourly. The moral Blackwood. The one unspoiled by all the tainted funds that financed your schooling, your easy existence, your valued ethical superiority. No, I denied. Just the one who chanced to be positioned correctly when it all began collapsing. My device signaled with a message from Thomas. Board verifies Walter stepping down accepted. Media session at 2 p.m. Your attendance solicited. I displayed Victoria the note, something altered in her demeanor. The actuality of our dad's yielding finally absorbing. Walter Blackwood had never relinquished anything in his existence, that he would abandon his role, his invention, his essence, conveyed volumes about the gravity of the circumstance. What occurs to us? She inquired, abruptly resembling the younger sister I scarcely recalled from youth, the one who would slip into my bedding during storms, seeking solace from terrors. To Alexander and me. That relies on you, I affirmed candidly. The strategy includes a route ahead for kin members who collaborate entirely and dedicate to the fresh moral structure. And if we don't? Then you'll confront the repercussions solo. I held her gaze firmly. I can assist you through this, Victoria, but I won't protect you from duty. She remained silent for an extended period, rotating her Java cup in her palms, observing the dark fluid whirl. I must converse with Alexander, she ultimately remarked. After her departure, I switched into my fresh attire and drove centrally. The press presence had increased. Broadcast lenses, photographers, journalists with recorders extended like armaments. Demonstrators had assembled too, staff concerned about their positions, advocates with placards condemning business graft, regular residents voicing revulsion at another instance of affluent privilege. I entered via a lateral access where Thomas awaited, his aged countenance serious but determined. The shift group is gathered, he remarked, leading me through rear passages. The board desires you to deliver a remark at the media session. Me? Why? You symbolize continuity and alteration concurrently. The Blackwood identity without the Blackwood burden. The media session felt otherworldly. Lens flares, recorders thrust ahead, journalists yelling queries as Diane presented me. I devoted my profession in silent lecture spaces, not press spectacles. Professor Catherine Blackwood will speak to you concerning the trajectory of Blackwood Enterprises, she proclaimed, stepping aside. I neared the stand, the drafted remark in my grasp. But as I surveyed the ocean of countenances, some adversarial, some inquisitive, all focused, I set the sheet aside. Today is challenging, I commenced, my timbre firm despite the unease in my core. Challenging for our staff, our associates, and yes, for the Blackwood kin. The irregularities disclosed in today's updates are indefensible. They signify a violation of communal faith that cannot be diminished or rationalized. Len's shutters snapped quickly. In the foremost row, Thomas provided and supportive inclination. But Blackwood Enterprises exceeds the total of its errors. It's the thousands of staff who played no role in these deeds. It's the structures that accommodate enterprises, the crossings that link groups, the projects that rejuvenate districts. I halted, establishing visual contact with several journalists. My dad, Walter Blackwood, has stepped down his head. This is fitting and required. The board has designated a temporary command group that I will lead, centered on 3 focuses: total openness with examiners, organizational changes to avert future moral failures, and safeguarding of blameless staff and initiatives. The space burst with inquiries. I elevated a palm. I entered this firm 3 days prior after discovering that my mom had discreetly obtained ownership equity before her passing 3 decades ago. I'm not present to allocate fault or pursue reprisal. I'm present to guarantee that what's valuable is preserved and what requires alteration is altered. A journalist shouted. Will penal accusations be lodged against your dad and brothers and sister? That's for accusers to decide, I responded. What I can convey is that anyone entangled will collaborate entirely with officials. Another voice. What equips you to direct this firm? I grinned faintly. 3 decades instructing morals and writings, a lifetime noting the outcomes of decisions made purely for gain, and perhaps most vitally, the viewpoint of someone who wasn't present when the troublesome choices were executed. The inquiries persisted for 20 minutes. When Diane ultimately concluded the session, I felt exhausted but strangely invigorated. I in the preparation area afterward, I discovered my dad observing the reporting on a display, his countenance inscrutable. Not poor, he remarked, surprising me. You didn't cast us to the predators. That was never my aim. He pivoted to confront me. Your suggestion this dawn. You were earnest completely. Why would you desire my assistance? I'm poisonous now. Because you understand this commerce, I affirmed. And because despite all, you're still my dad. Something glimmered across his countenance, perhaps the specter of feeling long repressed. What precisely are you suggesting? And consultative position behind the scenes, assist me grasp the commerce while I manage the moral reset. He pondered this, his entrepreneur's thoughts visibly computing perspectives. And Alexander and Victoria? That relies on their selections now, I affirmed. The entrance is ajar, but they must pass through it voluntarily. Later that afternoon, I discovered myself in what had been my dad's workspace, now provisionally mine. The metropolis extended below, the bay visible afar. I followed the horizon, pinpointing structures with the Blackwood identity linked to them, solid and metal witnesses to my dad's vision, however imperfect the individual himself might be. Melissa contacted as the sun descended, projecting extended shades across the workspace flooring. How are you managing? She inquired. Oddly well, I responded. It's daunting, but also illuminating. Mom, I viewed your media session. You were outstanding. Her timbre held a note of admiration that comforted me. But are you certain about Grandpa after all he executed? I'm providing him an opportunity at atonement, I affirmed. Whether he accepts it is his choice. The initial week of the Blackwood metamorphosis was harsh. Accusers questioned primary managers daily. We yielded thousands of records. The equity value dropped, then steadied as financiers tentatively endorsed our openness method. I labored 16-hour periods, resting on the workspace sofa more than once. Alexander astonished me by being the first to genuinely engage with the fresh actuality. He materialized in my workspace late one dusk, appearing worn but determined. I've been examining the harbor front records, he declared without introduction. There's more than the Globe is aware. I motioned for him to position. Inform me. He outlined extra issues, ecological shortcuts, falsified safety checks, his specialized knowledge supplying vital context I missed. Why are you disclosing this now? I inquired when he'd concluded. He passed a palm through his tousled locks. Because you were accurate about all, and because he paused. I'm weary of fearing what might be uncovered next. Fear is draining, I concurred. How do you manage it? He inquired abruptly. Confront all this without recoiling. I pondered the query. I devoted decades instructing pupils about figures who face ethical dilemmas. How could I do less when confronted with my own? He inclined his head gradually. Victoria remains in refusal. She believes this will all dissipate. It won't, I affirmed gently. The sooner she acknowledges that, the better. The next dawn, Thomas delivered unforeseen updates. The mayor's workspace is contemplating terminating all Blackwood agreements, including the Harbor Front Initiative. That would be catastrophic, I affirmed. Not just for us, but for the metropolis. The initiative is almost 60% finished. They're concerned about appearances, Thomas clarified, being linked to graft. I devoted the afternoon planning with Diane and the board. By dusk, we had shaped a daring suggestion: the formation of an autonomous supervision group with community inclusion to oversee the initiative's completion. We would also create a community advantage reserve using a portion of the initiative's earnings. It's novel, Diane conceded, but it might succeed. As I was departing the workspace that evening, I discovered my dad awaiting by the lift. He extended a substantial dossier. "What's this?" I inquired. "All I understand about our rivals, our strengths, our vulnerabilities," he answered. "Matters that don't appear in any firm record." I accepted the dossier, perceiving its significance. "Appreciation. Don't express gratitude yet," he remarked darkly. "Page 37 outlines our connection with Councilman Prescott. You'll need to handle it before the accusers discover it." I inclined my head, valuing both the details and the caution. "I will." As the lift entrances opened, he paused, then remarked, "You're performing better than I would have in your situation." From Walter Blackwood, it was the nearest to commendation I'd ever obtained. The mayor's workspace was an example of political wariness. Dense rugs muted noise, dark timber covering soaked illumination, and the deliberate placement of historical images implied a purposeful link to Boston's more honorable history, not its tangled current. "Professor Blackwood." Mayor Fitzgerald saluted me with a statesman's rehearsed grip. "A peculiar circumstance we find ourselves in." "Indeed," I answered, accepting the provided seat. Thomas positioned beside me while Diane and two board participants completed our team. Across the gleaming conference surface, the mayor's staff, primary aide, municipal council, and the head of city growth formed a cohesive front. "Let me be straightforward," Fitzgerald proceeded. "The metropolis cannot sustain contractual ties with an organization under national scrutiny for compensating public authorities. The political expense is excessive." "I comprehend your stance," I affirmed, "but terminating the agreements would injure thousands of laborers and leave the waterfront partially built for years." "That's regrettable, but it's also avoidable," I interjected, accessing my display dossier. "We've devised an option that shields the metropolis while permitting the initiatives to proceed." For the subsequent hour, we detailed our suggestion: an autonomous supervision group with substantial municipal and community inclusion, total monetary openness, and the creation of a $10 million Community Advantage Reserve. The Community Advantage Reserve would bolster low-cost residences, open areas, and employment preparation for area inhabitants, I clarified. "And we're ready to accept lowered earnings to ensure it's adequately supported." The mayor reclined, digits interlocked. "It's a compelling suggestion, but why should the metropolis rely on Blackwood Enterprises now?" "Because we're not the identical firm," I affirmed plainly. "Distinct command, distinct principles, distinct emphases, and because we're the only ones equipped to complete what's begun without years of postponement and lawsuits." The city growth head inclined reluctantly. "She makes a valid point. Retendering these initiatives would delay us at least 3 years." After 2 additional sessions and innumerable adjustments, we achieved a pact. The Harbor Front Initiative would proceed under strict supervision. The mayor obtained his political protection, and we maintained thousands of positions. Strolling back to Blackwood Tower subsequently, Thomas grinned for the initial occasion in days. "Eleanor would feel gratified," he remarked. "You bargained like an experienced manager while preserving your standards intact." "I had excellent instructors," I answered, "in writings and in existence." Back at the workspace, I discovered Victoria awaiting in my provisional command center. Her customary refined look had returned, but something differed: a fresh seriousness in her gaze, perhaps. Alexander informed me about your session with the mayor, she remarked. He says you preserved the harbor initiative. We preserved it, I amended. It was a collective endeavor. She meandered to the pane, gazing out at the metropolis. I've been reflecting on what you remarked about accepting duty. And I've resolved to collaborate entirely with the probe, she affirmed, her timbre softer than I'd ever perceived. I've directed my counsels to contact the accusers. The confession evidently cost her. Victoria's whole self had been constructed around being the impeccable, merciless Blackwood offspring. That's a courageous resolution, I affirmed. She pivoted, a spark of her former resistance returning. I'm not executing it to be courageous. I'm executing it because it's practical. Alexander displayed me the proof they possess. Resisting would only worsen it. Practicality and morals frequently coincide, I noted. Whatever your motives, it's the correct selection. She examined me with fresh eyes. You're not what I anticipated, Catherine. What did you anticipate? Retaliation? Boasting? Instead, she paused, seeking the term. Reconstructing. That was perpetually the strategy, I affirmed. Mother's strategy. The metamorphosis of Blackwood Enterprises advanced at an astonishing rate over the ensuing weeks. The morals group formed, with esteemed scholars and past overseers accepting roles. We employed a primary adherence officer with an impeccable standing. The equity value started a cautious rebound as the market reacted to our openness method. Not all proceeded seamlessly. Several managers stepped down rather than confront the fresh examination. A primary financier threatened withdrawal until our personal discussion convinced him of our sustainability. The accusers persisted in their systematic labor, with Alexander and Victoria both endorsing collaboration pacts that would probably prevent them from incarceration. My dad's path was more intricate. Openly shamed, privately subdued, he vacillated between opposition and acceptance. Our regular consultative sessions often grew strained, his former domineering style emerging before receding into reluctant admiration. Yet gradually, nearly unnoticeably, he was altering, posing queries instead of declaring edicts, contemplating outcomes beyond fiscal summaries. The morals group sanctioned the fresh acquisition guidelines. I informed him during one such session, flakes descending softly outdoors. Unanimous ballot. He inclined his head, assessing the record with vision aids he'd once been too conceited to don publicly. Firm structure, though Section 4 requires explanation on supplier connections. Already documented, I affirmed. We're handling it next week. He positioned the sheets, examining me with a look I couldn't fully decipher. Your mom maintained a diary, he remarked suddenly. Were you aware? I shook my cranium, astonished by the transition. Discovered it while emptying the secure residence. He paused. She inscribed about you frequently. Your autonomy, your uprightness. She perceived it early, who you would evolve into. The disclosure lingered in the space between us, more meaningful than it might seem to an external observer. Walter Blackwood did not readily admit error. I'd like to peruse it sometime, I affirmed cautiously. I'll have it delivered. He arose to depart, then halted. The Eleanor Blackwood Community Hub suggestion, the one in the aged records. Were you earnest about reviving it? Yes, I affirmed. We commenced construction in spring. Something eased in his countenance, not quite a grin, but a softening of the rigidity that had characterized him for so long. The institution had allowed me a prolonged absence after realizing that my command at Blackwood offered a distinctive chance for their commerce morals curriculum. We created a placement where chosen pupils could witness business recovery directly. It was a graceful resolution to my split allegiances, though I still succeeded in occasional guest instruction, keeping one foot in the scholarly realm I cherished. The firm holiday gathering occurred at the Fine Arts Gallery, intentionally restrained compared to prior years' lavish affairs. I positioned at the fringe of the assembly, observing staff and their kin relishing the dusk. Their initial caution toward the fresh system slowly yielding to wary hopefulness. Melissa located me near the Era artworks, bubbly vessel in grasp. You've accomplished something extraordinary, Mom, she remarked, motioning toward the assembly. They're not merely relieved to possess positions. They're gratified again. It's still delicate, I warned. We have an extended path. But you've initiated, she maintained. That's what counts. Across the space, I noticed my dad in dialogue with Diane and several board participants. He met my gaze and elevated his vessel slightly, a discreet recognition. Did I ever share about the volume I was instructing the day your grandma's message reached me? I inquired Melissa abruptly. She shook her cranium. The Winter's Tale. Shakespeare's narrative of deprivation, atonement, and unforeseen fresh opportunities. I grinned at the recollection. I've instructed it numerous times, but never genuinely grasped its strength until now. Later that dusk, I visited the firm repository, a temperature-regulated space in the lower level where Blackwood Enterprises' chronicle was carefully maintained. Among the designs and images, I located what I sought, the original formation records. My mom's autograph beside my dad's, her input concealed but vital from the outset. I followed her refined script with my digit, sensing a bond across decades. We achieved it, Mom, I breathed to the vacant space. We're reclaiming your vision. Spring emerged with surprising mildness. The commencement event for the Eleanor Blackwood Community Hub attracted a moderate assembly, staff, locals, municipal authorities tentatively embracing the firm's fresh course. I positioned at the stand, sunlight comforting on my shoulders, my dad seated nearby with Alexander and Victoria flanking him like supports. Melissa stood in the foremost row, her countenance beaming with silent admiration. This hub signifies more than a structure, I affirmed, my timbre carrying across the collected countenances. It embodies a dedication to principles that surpass earnings boundaries: wisdom, community, availability, and verity. As I drove the symbolic tool into the ground, I sensed something align. Not a conclusion, but a persistence. The Blackwood heritage re-envisioned not as spires of transparent and metal, but as areas where individuals could assemble, acquire, and develop. The board had lately approached me about eliminating the temporary from my head title. I'd solicited time to ponder, though Melissa had merely grinned knowingly when I informed her. Some selections decide themselves, she'd remarked. That dusk, I visited my mom's resting place for the first time in years. The burial ground was serene in the assembling twilight, avians calling tenderly from freshly sprouting branches. I placed pale blooms, her preferred, against the plain marker. You perceived so far forward, I uttered softly. You sowed kernels knowing you wouldn't witness them blossom. A mild wind stirred the turf around me, carrying the aroma of soil rousing after winter's rest. In that instant, I comprehended with flawless clarity what my mom had known perpetually. Genuine heritage isn't constructed in metal and solid or quantified in currency and fractions. It resides in the selections we execute, the verities we respect, and the connections we forge across the gaps that separate us. Some riches are tallied in structures, others in shattered patterns, repaired bonds, and restored poise. The richest bequest, I realized as I proceeded back through the extending shades, is the bravery to remain resolute when the world insists you yield. 5 years subsequently, fall sunlight poured through the base-to-top panes of the Eleanor Blackwood repository, projecting warm shapes across the refined wood surfaces where a dozen adolescents bent over volumes and devices. I halted in the entrance, relishing the soft flutter of sheets flipping and the sporadic murmured discussion. This had been my mom's aspiration, a space where wisdom was prized above riches, where concepts thrived freely. Quarterly summaries are prepared for your assessment, Miss Blackwood, my aide remarked softly, extending a slender dossier imprinted with the fresh Blackwood Enterprises emblem. The original sharp design now mellowed with an unfolded volume symbol that represented our dedication to openness. Appreciation, Daniel. I'll examine them this afternoon. 5 years had altered both the firm and our kin in manners I never could have envisioned that pivotal evening when I first accessed my mom's message. Blackwood Enterprises had arisen from its graft controversy, not simply restored, but reimagined. Reduced in certain aspects, more substantial in others. We disposed of initiatives built on dubious bases and invested substantially in enduring growth and community-focused efforts. Our earnings were narrower, but our moral impact was strong. The Eleanor Blackwood Community Endowment now claimed the whole ground level of Blackwood Tower, its purpose extending far beyond the original repository. Learning programs, low-cost residence efforts, and cultural grants flourished under its coverage, all directed by the standards my mom had cherished. I traversed the repository to my favored location, a recessed pane overlooking the bay where the once disputed harbor initiative now stood finished. The complex incorporated not just premium residences and high-end shops, but also low-cost dwellings, open green areas, and a career preparation hub. It had become a model for principled city growth across the country. "I thought I'd locate you here," remarked a known timbre. My dad positioned in the entrance, resting on a walking aid that was now a requirement rather than a pretense. At 85, Walter Blackwood had softened in ways none of us could have foreseen. The judicial outcomes of his deeds had included substantial monetary sanctions and a deferred term, but the true penalty had been the communal shame. Yet from that shame had emerged an unforeseen atonement. "Just verifying matters before the board session," I affirmed as he joined me at the pane. "Melissa contacted. She's delayed. Some urgency at the facility." My offspring had created a communal wellness hub in one of Boston's neglected districts, applying her health expertise to groups that required it most. She'd lately been designated to the metropolis's wellness panel, a role that imbued her with intent and occasionally caused her tardiness for kin assemblies. Alexander messaged too. The morals workshop in Chicago extended. My brother had converted his ordeal into something productive, becoming a desired lecturer on business morals and adherence. His sincere regret and dedication to improvement had slowly gained him esteem in arenas where the Blackwood identity had once equaled graft. "And Victoria?" I inquired. "Already at the eatery with her kin." My sister had perhaps experienced the most astonishing alteration. After a phase of fierce opposition to the fresh order, she had ultimately discovered her niche directing the endowment's global efforts. Her societal links redirected for resource gathering and consciousness. My dad gazed out at the bay, his outlines still proud, but tempered by time and modesty. "I was examining the quarterly figures this dawn," he remarked. "We're still not where we were prior." "No," I concurred. "We're somewhere superior." He inclined slowly. Eleanor perpetually claimed there were assessments beyond currency. A minor grin crossed his countenance. I never grasped what she signified until now. We positioned in amicable quietude, observing vessels carve pale trails across the azure bay. 5 years prior, such an instant would have been inconceivable. The writing scholar and the shamed magnate discovering shared foundation in a mutual heritage. "Prepared for supper?" he inquired ultimately. "It's not frequent we assemble everyone these days." "Just one additional matter to verify," I affirmed, guiding him to a corner of the repository where a transparent enclosure displayed items from Blackwood Chronicle. Among them rested my mom's message, meticulously conserved. Its aged sheets a witness to her foresight and insight. Beside it placed a fresh volume, the initial printing of my work, The Unforeseen Bequest, Morals, Commerce, and Kin Heritage. It had developed from an absence project into something more meaningful, part personal account, part commerce morals analysis, part investigation of how writing's ethical structures could inform business direction. My dad examined the display, then pivoted to me with a rare display of bare feeling. "She would feel gratified with you, Catherine, with what you've constructed from what was fractured." "With what we've all constructed," I amended gently, linking his elbow as we proceeded toward the lift. Some bequests aren't quantified in currency, but in the bravery to re-envision what's feasible. As we emerged outdoors into the sharp fall atmosphere, I glanced back at the structure where my mom's identity now gleamed in refined metallic script. The genuine wealth I had discovered wasn't in the reserves she had covertly created or the equity she had discreetly acquired. It was in the principles she had instilled, kernels that had patiently awaited the proper period to flourish. Sometimes the most precious heritage isn't what we gather, but what we venture to alter. And sometimes the most unforeseen bequest is the opportunity to become who we were perpetually intended to be.